Hello, and welcome to another episode of Adventures in Messaging. I'm Emma Stratton, and today I am joined by the lovely Kevin Garcia, Head of Product Marketing at Retool. Hello, Kevin. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you. I'm so excited to have you on the show because I'm actually a fan of yours. Kevin did an amazing interview with Marcus Andrews on the Product Marketing Experts podcast, which is another Sharebird podcast. And you went deep about research and how research informs messaging. And I remember listening to that and thinking, wow, these are some really, really good, actionable insights. So I'm super excited to talk with you today, Kevin.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I'm not unique in those insights at all, but excited to share more if I can.
Yeah. So it's interesting. People get into product marketing from all different disciplines and all different backgrounds and experiences. And you actually started out in the academic world studying cognitive neuroscience, which sounds super fancy to me. Tell me how this background of yours really played into how you approach product marketing and, of course, your research strategies.
Yeah, of course. So I studied a lot of cognitive neuroscience, which again is not very fancy. It's just how your brain puts together things to understand thoughts and understand the world around you. So things like understanding how a museum works when you're in person versus maybe seeing it in a digital space, and how you remember things, how you think about things, what you look at. And studying something in the sciences was really interesting for me because it sort of hyper focuses on researching very small, detailed questions. So in these fields, a very big focus on learning through iteration, learning through very specific nuanced questions, and listening to what the research is telling you and pivoting accordingly. And I think all of those things were very relevant to product marketing. I did not know product marketing existed at the time. I did not particularly think or know that I was going to land in the tech, but I do think it was great preparation for me. It was an exercise in coming to the table with an open mind and rigorous practices, and you can apply that a lot to the work that I do every day.
Yeah, that is so cool. I love you apply like the scientific method to
Yeah.
marketing, and I like that. So let's talk about research then. What is your general approach to bringing research into new messaging? Because we all know it's important. We all don't necessarily have enough time to do it like we want, but in an ideal world, how do you really approach research from the beginning to the final development of the messaging?
Yeah, of course. So I mentioned this before with Marcus as well. You need to really think about how much time do I have to invest in this. I don't think the right answer for every business is to spend a year or 2 years or 3 years researching every small little detail. So the first thing you have to do is figure out what are the priorities for my business? What are the most important unanswered questions that are hard, meaty, complicated, controversial? And how can I add the most value for users or for potential new users, if that's the goal for the company this year, to really understand what our product does, what our product is, and where our product's going? If you prioritize and really think through, these are the most important questions that I want to ask and talk about, then let's go deep. Figure out your timeline, figure out your investment. How much time can I spend on? And I would say it's a huge spectrum. There will be times that naturally you'll want to invest a very rigorous and formal process. For example, redoing the messaging for the company at the company level. When you all are maybe adding new product lines or making a pivot that requires everything to change a little bit, it makes sense to spend some time and carve out some focus for true messaging research. On the other end of the spectrum, if you're an early stage startup and you're the only marketer, it's totally okay to be thinking about it in a more loose sense. So thinking about, how can I talk to one or two customers a week, or a few customers a month, or maybe listening to gong calls before I jump into meetings, just to build context. The benefit of getting formal time to research is that you get to answer one or two questions very deeply, but you can also build a repository of sort of intuition and stories for yourself, doing just very simple listening to a few calls every week, or maybe just chatting with customers. So my approach to research in a nutshell is define what kind of questions you want to ask and define how much time you have to answer them. And then create a project that makes sense for those tasks. So for example, I was recently at Segment as the head of product marketing there. We were trying to figure out how much or how little to lean into the customer data platform space. The company, for context, was one of the most technical options and developer-focused options in a very marketer-driven purchasing cycle and a marketing-driven persona, for the most part, for CDP at big enterprises. And so the question was, how do we figure out where we fit? And so this actually did require talking to potential customers who hadn't purchased Segment yet, talking to existing customers who had been with us for a long time and sort of bought into the way that we think about things, talking to analysts and talking to folks who are looking at this from a bigger vantage point, things like investors that weren't invested in us, but were looking at the space. And when you do all those things, you actually start to develop a really strong opinion as to how you want to define our business in this space. But most importantly, if you feel like you are making a decision one way or another, Segment ultimately ended up saying, we are a CDP, but we do really think of ourselves as more infrastructure focused. And so it was CDP, developer focused is an answer. And we built conviction. And I think people sometimes forget the last part of research, which is connected to business value. So you don't just want to spend the time asking questions. You want to circle back with everyone and remind them, hey, these conversations with outside folks, these conversations with investors, these conversations with potential customers and existing customers built conviction for us to move forward in this way. And these are the 5 or 6 things that we can prioritize now. And these are the 5 or 6 things or whatever that are no longer priorities based on what we learned. So the last part of research that I'll sort of really hype on is connected to something. Make it real for people and give yourself the chance to reflect on it, because that's what makes research powerful. It's a body of work that doesn't go away. Your decisions might prove to be better or not so great for the company, but the research that powers them can still be used for the entirety of the time that you're there.
I love that. That is so good. And this is why I love that episode that you did. First of all, it's a really thoughtful approach to research. And I love how accessible it is, because you're saying it doesn't have to be this one way. It's not like all or nothing. You've got to spend a year on it or don't bother. See it as a body of work that you're building up over time that can help you in many different scenarios, not just for that one project or that one decision you're trying to make. And yeah, it seems like what you should be doing as a product marketer, just always kind of building up evidence and iterating. That's so good. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course. Yeah.
All right. So now we'll just move into the next part. That was really good. I really like how you approach it and make it so friendly and easy for people.
Thank you.
Kevin, so I would love to know, what is the best thing that you've ever learned about messaging in your career, whether it was some great advice you got or something from an experience?
Yeah, of course. So another Segment example, I reported into Diana Smith, who is now the head of Twilio.org product marketing. And she taught me a super valuable lesson in messaging, which is to say, cut the fluff or cut the BS, whatever it is that you'd like to say, but really focusing on editing yourself at the last stretch. A lot of times messaging will go through the ringer. It'll go through some amount of user testing. It'll go through the consensus train internally to make sure that it aligns with this and it aligns with that. The very gravitational pull is often towards including as much as you can that's differentiated about you. In the case for Segment, we were the CDP with the most customers. We were the leading CDP in the space. We were the most highly reviewed. We were often a developer favorite because we were focused on that market. And so when we opened our developer platform, and this is a project that was led by my team, not necessarily me, but I was a reviewer and learned the lesson anyway. We were working with a go-to-market team that was super excited about leaning on developers, understanding how impactful we've been to the CDP market and how much space we occupy there. You very naturally sort of get closer and closer to saying, we're the leading developer platform with global Fortune 500 all the way to startups, developer platform that creates the perfect developer experience. And you forget to sort of mention that the point of our developer platform was to make customer data accessible to developers who could then build new tools and new workflows using very clean, very concise, and very accurate customer data. And it's very easy to forget to go back and edit and think, does this actually make sense? Is this going to add value to someone's life? Are they going to really be able to understand it without having the context that I do in this seat? And Diana is just stellar at that. She's stellar at taking the bird's eye view and saying, we've gotten so caught up in trying to make this really, really impactful that we've forgotten to make it super accurate and easy to understand. And so that's a lesson that I've learned and have continued to learn, because I also have gravitational pull towards making sure that we sort of build something that internally folks can get excited about. But I do think it's very important. And one of the best ways to check this is obviously, one, reviewing it with someone who hasn't been working on the project with you because they have fresh eyes. And two, just circling up with a few customers, having a few friendlies that you can share this with and say, how would you have experienced this if you were purchasing, in this case, Segment or whatever your startup might end up being?
Yeah, that's so good. We can all relate to the gravitational pull, as you call it. And just what happens when a group of people kind of internally have been working on it and looking at it, as you said, for weeks or months, and it becomes normal. And so those fresh eyes are really important to say, like, hey, is this BS or does this make sense? That's a really good thing to keep in mind. And you mentioned superlatives like the best, the leading, the biggest. And in general, I know myself, when I read those superlatives on other websites, I don't believe them. It's
Yeah.
something about the superlatives that you're just like, nah, it's probably fluff. So that's a really good piece of advice that I'm definitely going to remind myself of. Speaking of good advice, I love to ask this of marketers, just to share kind of some of their hard-won insights through the career journey. If you could go back in time and give yourself some advice when you were just starting out in product marketing or marketing in general, what advice would you give yourself?
Yeah, of course. This actually is advice that I've been thinking about for a lot. I had the huge fortune of starting in product marketing, which a lot of people in tech don't really have the same sort of journey. You
Right.
hear a lot of times product marketers who are coming from other marketing functions, product functions, support functions, sales functions. And I often get the question, well, how do I break through? How do I become a product marketer? And I think one of the pieces of advice I'd give my younger self, and also any of these folks, is to try. The scariest and hardest part about product marketing is the notion that messaging, positioning, product launches, whatever it is, has to be perfect and has to be groundbreaking and has to change the game. And as much as I consider myself a success, I don't know if any of my work has really changed the way that Silicon Valley does operates. And so when you hold the bar too high, it's almost impossible to achieve it. And product marketing is actually one of the places that is most friendly and iterative, because it really does build on a product story over the course of the long run. It's never just one thing and one time and one shot. And so my advice is, if you're worried about your ability to write, which I have been, write more. If you're worried about your ability to research, practice. If you're worried about your ability to run a successful go-to-market, try to break down what exactly it means for you. Look at resources there's tons of resources online. The Product Marketing Alliance has amazing sort of templates and other toolkits. There's so many resources available now that there weren't before around product marketing. And so my biggest advice is just put yourself out there, find the resources, find small projects that sort of get you to feel more comfortable and confident in this work. And over time, what you'll find when you look back is, oh, wow, I was doing a lot of really great stuff and I learned a lot, because there isn't a magic formula. It really is learning by doing in product marketing. And that's something that I've often needed to hear as someone who tries to look out and hold for the perfect answer, the perfect go-to-market, or the perfect most people aren't doing, which is putting yourself out there and trying.
Yeah, that is such good advice. It's good advice for life in general, but also just, yeah, there is no perfect one and done. I mean, you're constantly iterating, you're constantly improving. And that's really, really good advice. There are so many great resources out there, especially now for product marketing. Like you mentioned, Product Marketing Alliance. And of course, Sharebird community has a ton of great content where leaders like yourself are just kind of sharing really relatable kind of insights. So it can all be learned. It's just about giving it a try. So that is great advice. Thank you so much for sharing. It's been awesome chatting with you, Kevin. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much, and wishing everyone the best. It's such a great resource for folks, and I appreciate getting to be a guest here.
It's great to have you. And thanks to everyone who was watching today, too. See you.